Count now. Okay. Good evening. It's 7 p.m. on Thursday, September 11th, 2025, and I'd like to call to order the Affordable Housing Trust meeting. Our first thing on the agenda is the reorganization of the board, which was done in July. Secondly, we have to review and approve the minutes.
Yeah, from the June
From the
2025
June.
meeting.
Correct. Do we have them?
Yeah.
They were in the Google
they
Meet.
are.
Okay, so they were in the drive.
Okay.
Next.
Move approval. I'm going to move approval.
Are you going to move approval?
Yeah.
Okay,
And
can I get
I'll
approval?
have to second that approval.
Can I vote to approve?
Yes.
All in favor?
All in
Aye.
favor?
Aye.
Okay, oh, all those say aye. Yeah,
Yes.
Sorry. It's been a couple of months.
My
Echo.
fault, sorry.
And then review and sign bills. Do we have any tonight?
No bills this evening.
Okay, any board member comments?
Negative.
No comments. Okay, let's get down to our new business. First thing is the vacant town-owned parcels inventory update.
Yes, so since the last few months, we've been working to analyze town-owned vacant parcels for the purpose of developing affordable housing. I worked on narrowing down a number of parcels to a list of about 16 after going through a process of elimination. And right now, the planning department, we worked with CMRPC to do a deeper analysis of the 5 largest parcels that were identified. And the objective of the analysis was to categorize them by certain factors like environmental, transportation, and social. And we have Gabe Treber from CMRPC, who worked on the deeper analysis, who's going to just give a brief overview of the Excel sheet that was developed and answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, great.
Yes, thank you for having me. And would I be able to screen share?
I think you can. Let me just,
Okay.
yeah.
So I put together a bit of a presentation. So
Oh, great.
just give me a sec. All right. Does that work for everyone?
Yes,
Yes.
we can see that.
All right. Beautiful. And I'm happy to zoom in a little more. If that
Do we have
helps.
this?
No, no.
I'll send this to you guys after the meeting.
Okay,
Thank
thank you.
Yeah. So thank you all for having me tonight. Like Kushal said, we're just here to give a little bit of an update on the prioritization plan for vacant parcels for affordable housing development. As a bit of background, we've been working with the planning department staff to develop a process to analyze parcels for their applicability for affordable housing development. As of now, we have identified 18 different factors of analysis that we've put into 3 different buckets just to kind of help understand it: environmental, transportation, and social. And we have begun a draft analysis of 5 of the parcels, which I think is what we're talking about, the 5 largest parcels: 31 Cypress Avenue and 31R Cypress, 40 Farmington Drive, 210 North Quinsigamond, and 419 Walnut Street. And so you should be able to see we have 31 and 31R Cypress Avenue, so those are adjacent parcels. I believe that's behind the high school. 40 Farmington Avenue, 210 North Quinsigamond along the lake, and 419 Walnut Street. I think it's the border with Westboro. And so I think tonight I'm just going to show kind of how we've been kind of approaching this. And we've started with kind of a manual analysis of the parcels before with the intention of building out a GIS approach so that we can kind of automate this and maybe expand this to, include whatever parcels the town wants to look at. So in terms of environmental, we have, for each of these parcels, we kind of looked at the available data and we're able to kind of pull out just kind of, we haven't scored these parcels yet, but we're in particular, but we're kind of looking at a high level analysis of these parcels and, it's looking, you can kind of see the distinctions between the different parcels based on their relationship to the different metrics. So I'm just going to go through each bucket of analysis that we're looking at. And then at the end, I kind of have a draft approach to scoring it, and I'd love some feedback from the trust and from planning department staff, as just so that we can like refine the rubric. So in terms of environmental factors, we have identified 6 different environmental categories: presence of endangered species, presence of sensitive habitats, presence or proximity to wetlands, presence or proximity to floodplains, the presence of steep slopes, and any sort of, potentially identifying problematic soils. So we've been able to identify through the town's parcel viewer the first 4 of these categories: endangered species, sensitive habitats, wetlands, and floodplains. Those are all fairly straightforward. And steep slopes and soils, when we build, based upon feedback from the trust, if we want to add or subtract any of these categories, those can be easily included into the GIS model. And so just from the outset, I think, in my opinion, kind of looking at this, and I think discussing this a little bit with staff, I think environmental categories, we might want to kind of weigh those most seriously. We don't want affordable housing development in Shrewsbury to come into conflict with any environmental goals, and we don't want to, create affordable housing, in a floodplain, create a dangerous situation for any tenants in the affordable housing. And so just for an example of how we were able to look at these parcels, this is a screenshot from the parcel viewer. This is the wetlands layer. Or I believe it may have been the floodplains layer. But essentially there's several different layers we can kind of look at, and this is for 210 North Quinsigamond Avenue. And you can see it's in pretty close proximity over here. I believe that's to wetlands. So, that's something to keep in mind. Do we want to look at a wetlands buffer? Do we want to just look at if the parcel overlaps with wetlands? That's kind of an open question as we move forward in this process. And then, if we want to start to get into some feedback, this is kind of how I just as a draft approach, happy to change how we think about this, but kind of looking at these different categories, I would say for these environmental categories, any of the presence of these layers, I think would be a negative for their development. Endangered species, sensitive habitats, wetlands, buffers, floodplains, that could easily put you into, serious trouble, a serious situation. And then steep slopes or any sort of issue with the soil could just make for a more costly project. So I was thinking for those first 4, kind of looking at minus 10 points, if you did have these things present, and then, adding 10 points if they were not present. And then for steep slopes and soil issues, looking at minus 5 points and positive 5 points if they are or aren't present. So, before we move on, does anyone have any, does anyone think we're missing any environmental categories we should be looking at given Shrewsbury? Does anyone have any issues with kind of this sort of thinking with the scoring? And I think as the model is developed, we might be able to tweak it, and as we are able to develop results, I think get a more concrete answer on, see how these things play out. But does anyone have any thoughts before I move on?
I do not, no.
Okay,
Positive thoughts.
Yeah.
cool. Good. So then moving on, I think the next category that is important to look at, and I don't know how much more important this is than social, but it feels it's easier to measure these things. We looked at 6 different transportation categories, and we were able to assess this through Google Maps. And then I think if this model is imported into a GIS project, we basically you can do network analysis on the road map. But we're looking at access to roads, because some parcels like 31 Cypress just aren't on roads, so you'd have to build something probably through the high school parcel. If they're on a dangerous road, which is something I believe Walnut was identified as a dangerous road initially, but I think we can also look at accident data to have a more objective view. access to major corridors. So thankfully, being in Shrewsbury, basically all these parcels have access to Route 9 or 290. And then I think some sort of measurement of the distance to major corridors. Also measuring sidewalk access. Some of these parcels have good sidewalks. Some of them certainly do not. And then transit access within a half-mile radius. Unfortunately, I think all these parcels lack that walkable access to WRTA buses. And so, again, similar discussion. I think road access, yes, 10 points. No, minus 10 points. Dangerous roads, if it's dangerous, subtract points. If it's not dangerous, add 10 points. Major corridors, I think, is a little less important. It's not as much of a direct safety issue to residents, and it's not a development issue like road access. So if it has access, that's a plus, but only 5 points. If it doesn't have access, that's a negative, minus 5 points. And then sidewalk access and transit access, again, yes, 10 points, no, minus 10 points. And then I think for distance to major corridors, we're going to have to figure out a way to measure based on either travel. We can look at travel time in minutes or travel time in miles. And we'll probably have to take that number and then kind of create a multiplier for the number as we rate these different things of different importance. And then finally, we're looking at social factors. So we have 6 different social categories that we've considered. Favorable zoning, proximity to housing, specifically multifamily housing, so that we're kind of creating a coherent, more walkable neighborhood with the development of affordable housing. Proximity to industrial zoning, that was brought up as a potential concern, so kind of not wanting to put all the affordable housing right next to an industrial district. So kind of giving, the inverse of the housing proximity. We want to give points the further away it is from industrial zoning. Medical access, so we looked at, proximity to the UMass emergency room as well as urgent care facilities in the area. Public school access, obviously 31 Cypress is right next to the high school, but a lot of these parcels are not in very close proximity. I think just the orientation of Shrewsbury, it seems like most of the schools are clustered in one part of town. And then grocery access is something else we're kind of looking at, and we can get into that, but that's kind of both in proximity to stores. Thankfully, Shrewsbury has access to quite a few grocery stores in Shrewsbury, Worcester, and Westboro. But we also are kind of building out, and I think it's for, this is something we might be able to use in other projects, but a bit of a grocery affordability index to kind of classify grocery stores in the area as, median affordability, more affordable, and less affordable. Because obviously, a store like Whole Foods or Trader Joe's, I don't know if we'd want to say, if we're looking at low income tenants, we don't want to say, oh, well, you have access to a grocery store, but it's, Trader Joe's and you can't really get well-priced essentials. And so, again, looking at the scoring rubric, I think zoning, I think it's important, but at the same time, it's changeable. So I think I would say it's like a moderate boost compared to other factors because you can change zoning. Public school access within a half mile, I think that is a good thing. We might want to bump that up 10 points, up to 10 points, but again, a lot of these parcels, if we looked at the full list of 16, that might change the situation, but most of these parcels do not have very good school access, and I don't really know if people are going to be moving into affordable housing because it's next to a high school. And then proximity to multifamily housing, kind of negative points for how far it is from multifamily housing. Distance to industrial zoning, positive points for distance from industrial zoning. And then looking at medical access, again, like the proximity to housing, we want to give negative points the further the parcel is from an emergency room or urgent care. And then looking at the draft affordability index, this is very, very draft. I think we want to change kind of some of the items we're looking at, but I think this is kind of an example of the approach we're considering. Looking at various staple items at these stores, identifying, I believe this would have been as of sometime in August, but the price per pound, per dozen, per gallon at these various stores in and around Shrewsbury, and then comparing the percentage difference from the national average. So you can see that Aldi, which makes a lot of sense, is more affordable. And then somewhere like Whole Foods, which makes a lot of sense, is significantly less affordable. But places like Wegmans or Market Basket kind of end up in that mid-range on average. So that's something that's going to take a little bit more work to kind of get this settled. But I think the approach I might look at is kind of identifying what the actual affordable grocery stores are and using those as the measure. I think there's different ways we can kind of include all this data. And so this is just overall the draft scoring rubric we're looking at. As I talked about before, kind of broken into the 3 different sections. So I think if there's any questions, we still have a lot more work to do on this, but I'd love to get feedback. I think if anyone has any strong opinions on any of these categories, if they think these need to be weighed differently, just from the outset, and then if people think some of these are redundant, or just because we don't want to create like a whole GIS layer if people think it's silly, and then also if people think we're missing anything really significant that maybe is particular to Shrewsbury that we should be considering.
I think that this is great. I really appreciate your work in this. Very comprehensive. I did have a question on access to. I'm sorry, I'm looking at a spreadsheet here. The transportation access.
Yes.
I know you talked about the WRTA bus route. Is that taking into account future WRTA's future plans of expanding that route?
It is not. That's
Okay.
something good to consider. I was only going off the current WRTA maps, but
Okay.
we certainly could. That's something to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, I'd just be interested in looking at that. I haven't cross-referenced since this is the first time I'm seeing the addresses, so I don't know if there is overlap or if they will be close to
Yeah.
WRTA's updated plans or future plans.
Are they just talking about extending that one line that goes into Shrewsbury?
Yes, extending the line, and I believe, and Chris, maybe you can assist. I know that I'm putting you on the spot, but I believe they talked about also expanding it more into Westboro, and also I think going into Northborough Crossing. So really making that route longer and accessing different areas, not just in our community, but in our neighboring communities for
Yeah.
groceries and for shopping and
Yeah,
other
no,
amenities.
I can definitely. I'm sure we can get. CMRPC works with WRTA, so I'm sure we can get like a GIS layer of that expansion plan included.
Perfect. Yeah, and I'm not certain of the timeline, but I think that's something that they will be within like the next 10 years.
I
or
mean,
something.
that sounds like the timeline for getting something online. So.
Yeah, I know it was definitely part of their longer range plans, and I think they were tying it to, I know they're very conscious of their ridership and tying it to those kinds of things. So that study was pretty comprehensive in reviewing, the ridership, both people boarding and where they're boarding and getting off of the bus as well. So,
Yeah.
So I think, it is part of their longer range process, but to that point of having this in GIS and starting with what is existing, but having that ability to then extend out as some of these factors obviously will change throughout the year. So being able to kind of adjust that will be useful for us.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the WRTA service map, I think Shrewsbury is kind of a significant gap. I know, a lot of people in Worcester do a lot of shopping in Shrewsbury, and it's getting into Shrewsbury that way is pretty limited right now. So
Gabe, thank you for doing this.
Yeah,
This is great information. With the point system that you're using,
yeah.
it could help us kind of rule out a piece of land pretty quickly
Mhm.
over another, right? So,
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the other thing. So the good news is if you look at, I mean, if we're talking about kind of looking at individual parcels, I think, you know, it's a bit of a balance. I think for me, I think if you have these environmental issues, you don't want to be building in a floodplain. You don't want to be disrupting a natural site. I think that's a pretty clear veto on a parcel, in my opinion. I think for the transportation and social categories, I think it's really going to develop into more of a ranking system. But again, there's trade-offs for all of these parcels. You know, I actually think the Cypress Avenue, I think the proximity to the high school is kind of a benefit. It's a significant benefit compared to the other three parcels. But again, it's a high school, it's not an elementary or middle school, and there's no road access right now. So you'd have to build a whole new road into those parcels. You know, I'm thinking of other kind of, I think, you know, 40 Farmington, it's the only parcel with strong sidewalk access, but it's at the end of a cul-de-sac. You know, I don't know how feasible that would be from a traffic perspective to put in however many units of affordable housing, you know, with all the traffic that'll bring. So, you know, but yes, I agree. I think it would be very helpful to kind of, I think if we get this kind of figured out, I think you could pretty quickly be able to see what is and isn't viable.
okay. And then we
yeah.
can use the transportation, social, and things in Shrewsbury to kind of work, see how they fall within the points, and then
Yeah,
in a real life, actual type of
yeah.
environment of what we could
Yeah.
put into them.
A question. The North Quinsigamon, is that where Selco's going? That
No,
parcel?
there's the 240 North Quinsigamon,
Okay.
which is Selco. So, I'll
Okay.
look it down.
So it's down the street.
It's in
Perfect.
front of Turnberry. Is it in that area?
I think,
Across from like Eagle Head Cove,
Okay.
I think it's.
yeah, it might be across UMass.
It's right in that
not
area.
UMass,
I think
but
240's up here, past the map.
Yeah.
A little bit.
But
Okay. Anybody have any other questions, comments for Dave?
Question on, I know in the highlighted ones,
Yes.
there's a lot of data that you still need.
Yes.
For slopes and soils, are those things that, I guess I'm thinking about the soil, do you have to do the testing? Like,
No.
when is that, when
A
does
perk
that?
test?
I don't know.
I don't.
I don't really know what,
I mean-
what my question is. I guess I'm trying to understand, like, how do you get the data on the soil from the GIS, or? you
Yeah,
have to
my
actually go there?
understanding is like the state has pretty extensive base layers. I don't know how granular those get,
I
but
see.
I think
Okay.
if you're looking at the parcel level, I also don't think in a town like Shrewsbury, I don't know how significant of a concern soil quality, you know, not the quality, but just kind of, I know in some towns we've worked with, they have issues with soil where it leads to, I've worked with Paxton and they talk about they need redundant septic systems because of some of the soil quality in the town.
Okay.
I don't, based on the level of development in Shrewsbury, I don't think that's a problem. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. But my understanding is the state has, you know, soil layers at GIS. So we could just flag if there's an issue and maybe look at the amount of soil that's in a parcel. If there's a type of soil that we want to flag, kind of see, oh, is it 5% of the parcel versus is it 30, 40, 50% of the parcel? So,
Okay, that's helpful, yeah, I
Yeah.
just wanted a little clarity on that, so, that's great.
Okay, thank you so much. We really appreciate all the work you're doing for us to help.
thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Great,
You too.
thank you.
Same to
Thank you, Gabe.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, next on our agenda is the rental assistance program review.
Yeah, so I think what kind of came late today is a draft memo, which is kind of a proposal of a brief overview of what a rental assistance program in the town of Shrewsbury could look like. which includes, the proposed budget for the program, criteria for selecting applicants, and, the application process. I got some feedback from Chris as well as from the town manager's office. So we'll be working on finalizing after given the feedback. And, I hope to continue this in October's meeting as well to dive in more depth and, continue that conversation. But I'm just going to kind of give, some brief points from that memo. I think one major reason we were working on the rental assistance program was in the process of looking at the housing production plan. We looked at housing needs for our community, and we saw that almost 40% of renters in Shrewsbury are cost burdened, which means they spend more than 30% of their income towards housing costs. So that's a very significant number, which kind of matches similar numbers in other communities. And that was kind of the major reason, and kind of the framework I used was this CPA. There is the CPA website, which kind of helps you, which has tools and information of how towns could set up their own local rental assistance program. So I use that, as well as nearby towns, as Westboro just started their program in, I think they ended it in March and opened it in January. And I looked at the budget, and the proposed budget we're looking at here is about $175,000. So $150,000 would be for just rental assistance, and $25,000 would be for the regional housing agency, which would help us process applications. And so, I think Westboro spent approximately $25,000, and when Chris was in Grafton, I think this was also how much they spent it's a sum per each household. There's like a certain fee that the housing agency will collect. So kind of it's summed up to around that number as well in Grafton. And so the idea is to target about 25 households, and with a budget of, or with relief of $500 per month for about 1 year. So it'll total up to about $6,000 for each household. And the criteria would be, right now, we're looking at households who earn less than 80% of the area median income, and have housing costs need to be more than 30% of their income. And so these are kind of some of the major points in the memo. This is just early on discussion in this meeting. We will continue this in the next meeting. I also included a document which is a summary of about 12 to 13 that I found in Massachusetts, which was also used to draft the memo. So if you do have any questions, I can send you the links to some of these. Especially, I think the towns of Boxborough, Lincoln, and Westboro, where I heavily relied on, their information, their guidelines to help kind of draft this one. And I think also at the end of the appendix, I included a proposed timeline. We want to align this proposal with our included in our funding agreement to the CPC. So we're going to include that in our funding agreement, as well as our annual report to them. Because it's going to, similarly, we're going to recommend this to Fall Town Meeting. And once this gets passed at Fall Town Meeting, we can, start to issue an RFP for that regional housing agency, and hopefully to have that in the late summer.
Excellent. So it looks like the duration of 1 year, 12 months is about average for the rental assistance program.
Right.
Okay.
And I think I think right now in certain towns. I think in either Boxborough or Maynard. I think 3 years is the maximum a household would be, and then after that, they again include reapply, or rather than that, they open it up for new people. So I think right now, because this is a pilot program, I think the idea is to be a pilot program to kind of gauge the demand for the program, similar to what Westboro did. They just they also did it and they opened it for 2 months, and then after the funds were expended, they're gonna take another year to open it up again. So that was kind of my motive to only do it for a year.
And what's the oversight? Because a lot can change in a
Right.
year. Like, so somebody hits Powerball.
Uh-huh.
How is their oversight on if somebody's situation changes?
Right.
That they no longer continue it, they don't need the program anymore.
Right. I think so. We're going to have them. One of the requirements for them is to submit their pay stubs. So we're going to have the regional housing agency kind of verify all that information before that. And that's a good question. What happens even while they're in the program?
Right, 6 months into the program, their financial situation gets much better. And then
Right.
somebody else could use that assistance
Right.
money instead of this person who's.
Right.
No.
That's a good question. I am not sure if I consider that while they're in the program. I think I'll look into that.
Okay.
Yeah, and so typically what happens with programs like these, once a applicant is selected, a lot of this would be managed through a third-party consultant. We would be given a list of eligible applicants that we would then review for that. For those familiar with some of the CPA process, we typically have some form of agreement that, we would have these applicants sign. We can certainly include a clause that should their income change while they're receiving these funds, that they notify the town and the third-party consultant, at which time we can set up parameters of what happens with that. So what I would probably encourage is similar to how the regulatory agreements work for deed-restricted SHI units. If you're at 80% AMI and your income changes, you can go up to 140% AMI and remain eligible. So we could look at a formula similar to that that fits our needs. And so that's a piece of this too, is that this framework and this memo, there's a lot here. Kushal put a ton of work evaluating what other communities have done. And we can kind of do a little bit more digging on some of the back end and logistics of that. But none of this is really set in stone. This is our review and kind of based information on a possible program proposal for us to consider based on those other community examples that we were able to find. And so that's really feedback that we're looking for is that kind of stuff.
Okay.
What are the other items that we should be putting in place? One of the items that we may want to discuss is, are we targeting 80% AMI, or should we be a little bit more targeted at lower AMI income? So again, setting that threshold, you could say that it's at 40% AMI, and if they can go up to 80% AMI to be eligible, or so there's a lot of leeway in how we want to formulate that, and I think we'll have that discussion. We wanted to put this in front of you this evening and have this kind of initial discussion, but certainly spend some time on it, have additional discussion next month, and then we'll be on good track to kind of refine this further. So it's a more formal proposal.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I see it says the tenant will need to engage with the landlord, so that and the payments will go directly to the landlord.
Right.
Will we require a lease signed by both of them saying that their rent?
Or rather than a lease, it's more of an
And
agreement.
it-
So it'll be an agreement with the town, the tenant, and the landlord. Kind of
Right.
agreeing that, agreeing to the relief that the town will pay a portion of that rent directly to
Okay,
the landlord.
But should the landlord, like some people have month-to-month rent, I
Mhm.
mean, they don't have a lease, a one-year lease or something, but just so we know that they have that guaranteed housing for a year, with this landlord, between the tenant and
Oh.
the landlord.
Point.
And the landlord will be paid, but if the landlord decides in 3 months to throw that person out,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so that'll be a.
That's another good question, yes.
So typically what's done is, so that would be part of our application materials would be, that they would have to provide their lease to us, as well as any other information that we want.
Right.
We can set those parameters, and then again, that agreement, that would be signed, it would be signed by 3 parties, so it'd be signed by the renter, by the landlord, and then, by, the Affordable Housing Trust. And so that agreement would then say those kinds of things. Again, if they hit the lottery and are no longer eligible, we really hope that that does happen. If, you know, if for whatever reason there's an eviction or some other reason, and then the landlord would no longer be having that. And again, by having all 3 parties, you know, beholden to that framework, there's oversight on all accounts. And a lot of that, again, is also managed through the third-party consultant. So a lot of kind of checks and balances in place through that.
Right.
this looks great. Thank you for doing the work.
yes.
That's a lot of.
I think one also thing to note was we did meet with, the past couple of months, we did meet with people from different programs. We met with the Westboro, who runs the Westboro Human Family Services, who actually helps with
Yep.
this, and kind of their reasoning to also include in this rental assistance was a lot of our residents actually needed the help within the application, and there was a lot of feedback that, oh, we need, you know, to access certain documents and to upload them. So some housing agencies do not have the capacity to help, because some housing agencies, they view that, okay, we're only going to review if you're eligible or not. We're not going to do that extra work. So we could, you know, work with Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services or another nonprofit to kind of help that also. That was also a
That's good.
suggestion.
Yeah, that's-
I have another question.
Yeah.
Section 8, the raft folks,
Right.
the agencies, why are they not eligible? Is it a legal thing, or is it?
A lot of other towns, I think this was trying to capture the people who were not on raft, who don't really receive that, trying to kind of people who fall between the cracks of certain programs. So most rental programs, like if you're doing a municipal through the town, they don't usually allow people who are already receiving some form of assistance.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question on the budget breakdown. I think you said, or in here, it's 175,000.
Yeah.
Is there a breakdown, because the funding would be our dollars and also CPA.
Right. So that, yeah.
So is, I guess, could you elaborate more on how that breakdown would be? Like how much of the trust funds would we utilize for this? How much of the CPC's funds?
Right. We haven't decided yet, but maybe an ideal number is to do half and half.
Half and half.
To try and, you know, not exhaust our resources and also
Right.
use a part of the CPA funds. I don't know how that ratio will be determined. You know, maybe we will work down the line. That can be a question that's good,
Right.
so I can keep that as part of the feedback.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that,
Yeah.
because, and I think we've talked about it before.
Right.
Our funding stream is a little bit more limited than CPC's, so.
Right.
Yeah,
Our income stream, I should say.
I think that's something, so, you know, longer term, the idea for this, when we get to, if we get the funding agreement in place with CPC, which is, I know is another item on our agenda, but if we get that in place and this becomes a program under that budget that's submitted, part of that application process with CPA, we would develop that agreement of what the proportion of funds are. And to that point, because the CPA funds are more replenishable than trust funds, you know, I defer to this group and CPC in that discussion, but my initial recommendation is that it would be more skewed towards CPA funds, given that those are more replenishable than trust funds. So You know, I know we've had a policy kind of unwritten that we typically don't expend funds unless it's generating units, and I know we've parted from that for meaningful projects, but, you know, that's kind of the thought process. Because our funds are not replenishable, we're trying to generate those units. But
Okay, so, with the CPC funds, we can't use those for administrative purposes, so that 25,000 would have to be excluded from.
Correct.
right
Correct.
at the top, correct?
And those figures will adjust a little bit, so this is that initial breakdown, but, part of this, we would have an RFP that goes out to the consultant, and we will refine those numbers when we have what their fee is. We base this on, what we had seen in other, communities from consultants doing this work. So,
So I guess my point was more, we know off the top, we have X amount of dollars that the trust.
we'll have to
will
contribute.
have to contribute.
Correct.
Before we can even go into CPC.
Correct.
Okay. Anybody else?
I think this is great. Really
It
appreciate
was great.
you investigating, looking deeper into this, because I think it's certainly something we want to do. I was curious if in your discussions with the other communities that have done this, if they highlighted any like success stories. I know that privacy is sensitive, so I'm mindful of that, but did they share any of that?
I'm trying to remember. Westboro did share with me kind of just some, most people were just, you know, especially after effects of COVID, you know, people were just struggling with bills, and other things before being able to pay rent. So that was a major reason. You know, families struggling on just like a very tight budget. A lot of things that, you know, we hear. And so, a lot of seniors. So I think a lot of seniors who are on tight budgets, who were really, you know, who probably needed help in the application, because a lot of these applications are online. So, that was definitely,
Yeah.
they'd use this, Youth and Family Services,
That's a great
that social
tool.
worker.
That's especially for the elderly population.
Right.
Whether they don't have computers or can't navigate
Right.
these
Right.
applications, everything's online.
Right.
I know with my own parents, a lot of things, it's very frustrating for them to
Yeah,
get things
and
done.
What
Sorry, and I-
I'll offer, I'll kind of speak in vague terms for that
Yes, yeah.
sensitivity, but some of
Yeah.
some of the cases that we kind of saw as success stories, when we were doing this program in Grafton, is, you know, we were looking at that RAFT and IRMA program, and as that kind of, you know, we were similarly didn't want to compete with a state, use local dollars competing with a state program. But what we were finding, prior to, you know, initially retiring that program, was that there were people that did, for whatever reason, met all the criteria but did not meet the criteria specifically for that RAFT or IRMA. And so those people that, you know, for kind of nuanced reasons were not eligible for those programs, the community was able to have that discussion and decide, do we want to provide that support? And so there was I think a lot of kind of success stories out of that, of people that otherwise would not be served by state resources, that the community resources then filled that gap. So.
That's great, that would be.
That's awesome. And then I think to the point of seniors, I know we're early in the stage of developing this, but just want to make sure that when we publicize it, that we're very intentional about making sure that everyone who is not online is also able to get the information that they need, because 60 days is I think a good window of time, but I think if you find out late and then you got to get your paperwork in order, that time could really go quickly. So
Right, yeah.
wanna
I
just-
mean,
sorry.
yeah, no, 60 days was kind of what I saw from other communities. We can have that longer. That was just the standard of what I saw. So,
I think if it's too long, it
Yeah.
gets too drawn out, and
Yeah.
then people,
Yes, yeah.
it gets kind of,
right.
Yeah.
you know.
I just want to make sure that we're capturing, like,
No.
you know,
And I think
reaching out to.
part of the the regional housing agency will also, you know, help with outreach efforts as well. So that's also will helpful.
Is that something that, this has just popped into my head, you could put into a community advocate
Yeah, I think
so.
so.
We certainly could.
Yeah.
in something,
Why
you
not?
know, maybe a little article about it?
And let our.
When we get to that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, let our social agencies know that the program's out there, so
And
if
social-
somebody
yeah.
reaches out to them, they can be like, oh, here's where you can find
Right.
assistance,
We
like
could
she's reading
definitely
through family
develop some sort of
services.
framework to how can
Yeah.
we reach out to many people as possible. You know, use like again, we have many partners in town. You know, like the senior center. We have certain, you know, YMCA. All these like certain, you know, social clubs or social
Right.
places where people gather that we can help spread
But there are
information.
still some people that don't participate in
Yeah.
things like that, but they get their little paper on
Right, the
Fridays and
paper.
they
Yeah.
read it, cause it's all the town news. so
Exactly.
That's all, it was kind of thing. So, all right, anything?
Sorry, one more.
No?
I was curious if, for those who, in which their applications are denied,
Uh-huh.
in the other communities, did you see or observe or learn that, they perhaps steered them in a different direction? Maybe you're not eligible for this program, but you might be for a different one? Did you see that in your research, or?
I don't remember seeing what happened to applicants who were denied. It was more of people, again, suddenly had a rise in income, but,
Mhm.
you know, again, with Chris, you expand that a little because you don't want to suddenly drop them off from the program. But I think it was more about, yeah, I should do research, but I haven't seen and talk about what the process of denying the applicants. I think, well, in Westboro, it was more of like, even applicants who applied, they didn't necessarily collect all the information properly in time.
Okay.
So the social worker talked about like how, you know, making sure, checking that they have all their materials they did
Right.
before submitting it. So a lot of incomplete applications because they had to
Okay.
meet the deadline, but they weren't able to collect everything in time.
Right.
So,
Yeah, because I think if I'm that applicant and I didn't complete everything in time, deadline passed, now I'm frustrated and,
right.
you know, would want to know what my other options might be or are, so, I guess I'm thinking about it from that way.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that process typically lives with the third-party consultant.
Okay.
So they'll kind of generate a list of people that have gone through the application that have met it all. They'll work with them to make sure that it is a complete application, and then we get the list of names and rents that have been deemed eligible, is the way that I've seen it. So I do know that those consultants, especially to their credit, do a lot of work in the background to help those people find other resources if
Right.
they're not eligible. So I'm when people come to our counter, I'm always sending them to those consultants that we know about, because I know that
That's helpful.
if we can't help them,
Yeah.
they will know a program more than we do that's active. So they're in the weeds on that. So
That's helpful.
So I have another question.
I do too.
For just pulling the numbers from this.
Right.
Of the 25 people that apply, say we get 40
Uh-huh.
people that apply.
Right.
Is it a first come, first serve? Is it something that we review, find the most, more, ones with a bigger need, or how, is something we just determine, or?
Right. I think I can dive into more of that. That's some good feedback. I can, think about that. One thing I was thinking of was having similar to the vacant parcel ranking system of like, what are we looking for? Are they on the lower income, less than 50% AMI? Do they have at least 30% of their housing costs or their income towards housing costs, and maybe some other that will give them a higher score compared to others? We can kind of have a ranking system that way, or just that's an option. But how
Right.
to see that?
Yeah, but could we put language in there until something like, we have so much X amount available, not saying whatever, but, or until funds run out?
Right.
So we don't feel like, people, if
Right.
there was 40 and that, 15 aren't gonna get it, it's only because we didn't have enough funds
Right.
to.
I think
to
that
do it.
was Westboro. Yes, sir.
Westboro did something.
Yeah, so we could do, I mean, I think there's probably 3 paths to do that, and we can decide in that framework how we want to do it, but I think we could do an option of first come, first serve. We could do an option of where we evaluate. Frankly, I would probably lean away from that just because
Yeah.
it gets a little dicey.
Right.
But then the other option would be if you have that application period and do it, rolling, you could collect all the applications, and at the very end, you just split that evenly across all of them, which may reduce what they were expecting to get, but then would touch more people in that way. So
Yeah.
I think those are probably the 3 options that we could consider, and
Well, yeah, if you did like more of the third one, and you got 30 people, somebody's income might be a little bit higher, maybe they only needed 300, where somebody needed the full 500.
Right.
So you have a little bit more to spread out, something like that, but, and again, we have the 60 days to get the application in. You can't say day 30, oh, we're full.
Yep.
It just,
That's good. I
would
mean,
just-
I think from what I saw, Westboro's was first come, first serve, which is why they closed early. And that's why I thought, oh, they just discontinued the program when they said closed. And then I looked into it more and I'm like, oh, they just, because people applied, they had enough applicants, they just closed it.
Yeah, so I guess that would be something that would have to be determined,
Right.
maybe.
Yeah, I would want to make sure it's an equitable process, which I think that's what we would do, but.
And coming from the insurance world, if we deny somebody services, they have the right to appeal. Is
Right.
that going to apply in this case too?
I think there
If we deny
is-
people, is there an appeal process?
There is, I think, some other, I don't know if I put that in the memo, but I did see some other communities in their guidelines put a right to appeal process. Yeah, that's good.
This is good stuff.
Yeah, I know this is a little bit, hopefully you have more questions at the, because I hopefully continue this at the next meeting in more depth. Yeah.
Okay, thank
Review
you.
this and let me know if you have any questions. Email me.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, now we have the next agenda is the AHT and CPC funding agreement update.
Yes, so, at the June 12th and July 10th, Affordable Housing Trust meeting, the planning department, we shared a draft, Affordable Housing Trust and CPC funding agreement. This agreement would detail how much money we receive from the CPC and has certain conditions that we need to satisfy once you receive the money. The idea is that the money, it's not a fixed amount, it changes every year depending on, the projects that we have, on the number of projects we have in the pipeline. Also, one of the requirements is we will need to provide an annual report to CPC, which details all the activity that we have done and what we will plan to do. I think we decided that it'll be around January 1st of every year to kind of line with their CPC year-end reports are on November. And also kind of right before Springtown meeting. So to kind of give ample time for that process for Springtown meeting. And also we will apply for eligibility and project funding report for all projects that we do, similar to the CPC. I can just give me a minute, I'll just share that. So, kind of this was the funding agreement. There were, I think, some of the, there were a couple of things that the members of the CPC, they had certain kind of comments and that we incorporated some of the feedback, that we incorporated some of that feedback into some changes. I know that one of them were, if the money is not used for a certain year, certain time period, they could request that money back. So that was something that was added. I think interest, so any interest that we receive would also be returned, because that was not expressly mentioned in the agreement, so that interest will also be returned. As well as, that's in clause 13. There was another, yeah, annually honor January 1st, the trust shall provide committee and select board with a written update for the purpose of defining this agreement. So there was, I'm trying to see what the change was, but there was a change regarding specifically, all what projects that we will do and intend to do. And then there was exceeding 200,000. They just had a question about that. So most projects, anything that exceeds that amount will have to get approval by the majority of the select board and the CPC prior to finalizing that transaction. Any large transactions, yeah. Oh yeah, so there's this extra on I. Current balances for projects previously funded but not yet fully expended. So that was kind of to make sure they wanted to be able to track, what we have spent and what we have not spent. So these were kind of just clauses that were added.
Okay.
And kind of the update from this, we are glad to report at CPC's their September meeting that was on the past Monday. They were all, good with this, no other further questions. And so we wanted to see if you had any other comments. And if you do, if you don't, the process would be to have a joint meeting with the CPC at either of our regular times. I'll send you an email seeing what your schedule is, and we will, have each of us present at a joint meeting and sign together with the CPC and the Affordable Housing Trust.
Okay.
Yeah, so the CPC, they had a couple members that were missing, so they wanted to do the whole group and just make sure that everyone had their time to have any final say. And so that was kind of the suggestion, that we have the trust and the CPC together. One, it'll be a nice way to kind of memorialize the signature by both parties, but then also allows any kind of last minute details that the groups want to work out together. We'll all be in the same room to do that. So the joint meeting would have the benefits of that. So we'll coordinate what that date is with both groups, and happy to, and then that obviously will be posted.
So then does it go to the select board for approval?
Yeah, so
after?
the intent would be to have CPC and Affordable Housing Trust, if they're in agreement, to sign their sections, and then it would go to select board for their review.
And then,
Signature, yeah. And then, once all three parties have signed it, then we can kind of memorialize it, and then that would allow us to then pursue in May a
to go to
program
town
budget.
meeting.
Through town meeting, correct.
meeting,
And,
okay.
and through the regular CPC process. So we would put together the funding and eligibility application, just like any other project,
Okay.
with those specific budget items, and
So we
again,
would-
follow all the provisions in this agreement to enact that.
So for example, if we wanted to use it for the rental assistance, we could apply to CPC for those funds to fund this.
Yeah, in May, if this
in
is
May,
all,
If it's all.
given that timeline.
Okay, great. Anybody have any other questions?
I think I have a question on clause H. So we already have to, for any expenditures above 200,000, get approval from the select board. And so this is included so that the CPC also has a check on it, just,
Correct.
this is for specifically the funds that they
That
would
they
give
give
to
that
us
they,
if-
yeah, so our general bylaws require that, this mirrors that provision that, in the trust bylaws, that, any amount over 200,000 has to, receive a majority vote by the select board. This mirrors that and just says for any, community preservation funds committed, since we would have to do that with select board as well anyways, both parties, both community preservation and select board would have to, would have an opportunity to review that transaction.
Okay.
So, likely, the 200,000, likely that would be something like a land acquisition, so,
Right.
I mean, they would
Right.
be involved
Right.
pretty thoroughly from the start of any of that, so. But,
That makes sense to me. I do think, I mean, this is, I know I've said this, I think, in the previous meeting, but I think that this is great that we're at this stage where we can come to an agreement and hopefully at the next meeting or in the future, near future, sign this so that we can continue to foster that relationship with the CPC. I know, I think when I watched their most recent meeting, I think there were still some questions about like some of our missions, our mission and our goals and who we are and what we do. So I think having that annual, check-in with them to say, hey, this is what we're looking to do in the upcoming year. This is what we did in the previous, and hope to, have your support in this. I think that that's a great opportunity for us, not just to showcase to them what it is that we're doing and up to, but also to the community at large to see all the work that we're looking to do. So
And I think
I like
once we get that first project going, it will give us, everybody, a better understanding of how we will work together
Right.
and in the future and spend the money and all that. So definitely a positive.
and I think to your point of the success stories, I think we'll look at how we can memorialize those. If this is all successful, I think that'll be important to memorialize some of those in some way, to again, just show that, what the results of these are, so.
definitely.
Okay. All right, next, we have the Affordable Housing Trust Action Plan item, review and discuss engagements with nonprofit development partners.
Yeah, so this was added to the agenda kind of after reviewing some of the short-term actions from the strategic plan. It was, it's under some of the actions were, the first one is establish relationships with nonprofit development partners. Second one is collaborate with CPC and seek funding allocation. We're working on that right now. The third and fourth are inventory of public lands and properties ideal for housing redevelopment and consider acquisition of transfer priority sites. We're working on that. Participate in the update of the housing production plan. We just finished that. So kind of looking to the first one, we have a relationship with the Habitat for Humanity, but there are, partners that we have engaged. So, if I think that the idea was if you want, the planning department can, do some research and reach out to certain, developers as to, talk to them about certain development opportunities in Shrewsbury and understand what the work they're doing, specifically nonprofit developers.
I think that'd be great.
Yeah. So.
That'd be great. Mission-oriented nonprofit developers, I think, would be welcome in the community, and so I'd be interested in, seeing the planning department do that research and bringing it to us.
So that would just go over what they do, how they develop, or would we need a project for them to develop this?
I think right now, not necessarily.
Just to talk and establish.
Just
those
to talk to them,
relationships? Okay.
establish relationships, and kind of on parallel with, as we continue to refine our list and hopefully identify a parcel. So, hopefully these all are going in parallel.
Excellent,
Is the
okay.
idea.
Yeah.
And I would see it similar to our continued conversations with Habitat for Humanity. I know that me and you participated in the tour of one of their spaces in, or two of their units in Worcester, and, you know, I think any more relationships that we can build would be a good opportunity for us to learn more, and also for the nonprofits to learn more about,
Right.
you know, what opportunities
Yeah,
they may have.
I guess, yeah, the bigger we can expand our
Right.
people that we can work with, the better off
Right.
we, you know, I mean, I think we'll have more opportunities, maybe.
Right.
That's good. All right. Does anybody have anything else? Any other correspondence? No? Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Next meeting date.
Oh.
before
Oh,
the
yes.
next meeting.
So
I think.
All that time doing.
our
minutes.
next meeting is
Never on here.
October 9th, I believe.
Yes, I have that.
I have that as well.
So,
I see
you know,
no
if it's
conflict
available.
at this time.
I'll probably set reminders, so I'll probably email everyone the Thursday before, seeing if everyone is available, and if, you know, for some reason not, just email me. But I think for the next, I'm going to email you, seeing your availability, and then coordinate with, the CPC members to see their availability, to have that joint meeting. Either at their Monday meeting or our Thursday meeting. I think that's the idea. So we're just gonna figure that out.
That'd be great. And I think before we adjourn, for anyone who's watching this, we do still have 2 open seats for the trust. One of those is a select board appointment. The other is a town manager's appointment. So anybody who's interested in helping us create more affordable housing opportunities in the community, certainly encourage you to apply.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
In a second. All those in favor?
Aye.